It's the question that none of us ever want to admit that we ask of God, and yet we do. It's a question that lies just beneath the surface whenever we go through difficulties. When we get that phone call from the doctor's office telling us things we don't want to hear. When we get the call from a family member breaking news to us that just shakes our world. It's a question that rattles us whenever we see the bad things that seem to happen in our world on a daily basis, and especially when they come home and hit us directly. It's a question we don't want to admit that we ask, and yet it's there just below the surface. The question is simply, God, do you really love me? Now, you say, well, I would never ask that, and yet we do. So today we're in Romans chapter 8, beginning with verse 18. And this is one of the passages that just has some of the greatest promises that we love to quote. One of those promises is in 8:28, where it says, "For we know that in all things God works things together for the good, for those who love him and are called according to his purposes." But all of this passage, 18 through the end of the chapter, all of it builds on a little verse that Paul mentioned at the end of last week's last day of reading, where in Romans chapter 8 and verse 17, Paul writes, he says that if we are to share in Christ's glory, we're also to share in his sufferings. And that's one of those things where we go, what, wait? Now I want the glory of Christ. I want to share in that, but his sufferings as well? That's something that's in my future? We don't want to think about that. We don't want to hear that. And yet that is the reality for Christ followers, for all of us. That we do live in a land of suffering. We live in a world that is fallen, a world that is broken. And it's a world when those bad things happen, it causes us to wonder, is God still in control and does God still love me? And that's why Paul wrote the last half of Romans chapter 8. It's to reassure us that no matter what happens, no matter what we go through, no matter what we may face, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that nothing in all of creation, either in the visible world or in the invisible, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Governments cannot, principalities cannot, angels cannot, demons cannot, nothing. That nothing is going to change the way that God feels about us. Our circumstances, they don't tell us how God feels about us. God isn't one who, if he's happy with us, he blesses us, and if he's unhappy with us, he causes bad things to happen. It's a lie from the pit of hell that says that you can judge how God feels about you based on what's happening in your life. See, the truth is what you're going to read today. As you read today's verses in Romans chapter 8, I want you to read these verses and just sit back and hear them for what they really are. They are a love letter from your Father. They are a love letter from the one who loves you more than our minds can imagine. Just feel God's arms wrapping around you. Curl up on his lap. Feel the soft touch of his embrace as he whispers to you, "Nothing can ever separate you from my love."